In the neon-drenched corridors of the 21st century, we have become a civilization obsessed with being seen. We live in the era of the viral moment, where influence is measured in metrics of attention and authority is validated by the sheer volume of a digital roar. If you have a message, you shout it. If you have a gift, you monetize it. If you perform a miracle, you make sure the cameras are rolling before the first drop of water turns to wine. This is the American psyche, a restless, sprawling landscape of self-promotion, where the greatest fear is not failure, but invisibility. We are told from birth that to be someone, you must be known. You must build a brand, curate an image, and claim your seat at the table of public consciousness. But what if the most influential figure in human history operated on a frequency that was the exact opposite of our own? What if the King of Kings was the ultimate anti-celebrity? Welcome to the Gospel of Mark, a narrative that feels less like a polished religious tract and more like a gritty, high-stakes noir thriller. It is the shortest, fastest, and most urgent of the four Gospels, written for an audience in Rome who understood power, understood speed, and understood the brutal reality of an empire. Yet, nestled within this breathless account of action and movement is a mystery that has baffled scholars and seekers for 2 millennia. It is a concept theologians call the Messianic Secret, but for our purposes, we will call it the Clandestine King. In a world that demands a spotlight, Jesus of Nazareth repeatedly, almost stubbornly, chooses the shadows. Imagine the scene, a dusty road in Galilee, the air thick with the smell of salt from the sea and the sweat of a desperate crowd. A man with leprosy, a social pariah, a living ghost, falls at the feet of this wandering teacher. With a touch that defies every religious and hygienic law of the time, Jesus heals him. The skin clears, the nerves awaken, and a life is restored in a heartbeat. Now, in our modern framework, this is the moment for a press release. This is the moment to call the local news, to gather the influences, to ensure the testimony goes global by sunset. But Mark records a reaction that is jarringly counterintuitive. Jesus does not invite the man to join his marketing team. Instead, he looks him in the eye and gives a stern warning, "See that you say nothing to anyone." It is a command that echoes throughout the entire book. Whether it is a blind man seeing light for the first time, a girl being raised from the dead, or even the demons who recognize his divine authority, the order remains the same. Keep it quiet. Don't tell a soul. Not yet. To the American ear, this sounds like a strategic blunder. We are a people of the grand reveal and the victory lap. We want our heroes to stand on the podium and hoist the trophy. We want the world to acknowledge the win. But the Jesus we encounter in Mark refuses to play the game of public opinion. He is a revolutionary who operates in the quiet corners, a healer who shuns the applause, and a king who seems to be running away from his own coronation. This is the paradox of fame. In the very moments where his power is most evident, he is most insistent on his anonymity. Why this obsession with silence? Perhaps it is because Jesus knew something about the human heart that we have forgotten in our quest for likes and followers. He knew that fame is a cheap substitute for faith. He knew that if the crowds followed him only for the spectacle, only for the bread and the circus of miracles, they would never truly understand the gravity of his mission. If he became a celebrity, he would be a commodity to be consumed, not a savior to be followed. By silencing the witnesses, he was protecting the integrity of his message. He wasn't looking for a fan base, he was looking for a cross. As we journey through this story, we have to strip away our layers of modern noise. We have to put down the phones, silence the notifications, and step into the rugged, unvarnished world that Mark paints for us. It is a world where the most powerful man on earth walks among the broken and the forgotten, not as a conqueror seeking a throne, but as a servant seeking the shadows. He is the clandestine king, moving with purpose toward an ending that no one, not even his closest friends, could see coming. In our world, silence is often equated with weakness, or a lack of relevance. But in the Gospel of Mark, silence is the ultimate expression of authority. It is the quiet before the storm that will change the world forever. As you listen to these chapters, I want you to feel the tension of that silence. Feel the weight of the secrets kept on the shores of Galilee and the mountainsides of Judea. Ask yourself, why would a king hide? And more importantly, what does it mean for us in a culture that can't stop talking to encounter a God who tells us to be still and see the truth for ourselves? The story is moving fast, the stakes are rising, and the king is in our midst. But if you want to see him, you have to look past the glare of the lights and find him where he has always been, in the quiet, in the service, and in the mystery of a mission that refuses to be bought, sold, or broadcast. This is the Gospel of Mark. Let the silence speak. If Matthew's Gospel is a meticulously researched legal brief and Luke's is a detailed medical journal, then the Gospel of Mark is a handheld camera in the middle of a riot. It is the fast and furious of the New Testament, a narrative stripped of all excess fat, leaving only the muscle and bone of a revolution in progress. For a modern American audience, a people who invented the summer blockbuster and the 60-second viral clip, Mark is perhaps the most relatable storyteller in the ancient world. He doesn't have time for your genealogies. He doesn't care about the soft lighting of a manger scene or the intricate philosophies of the Logos. Mark starts his story in the desert with a man shouting and a king emerging from the water, and from that moment on, the brakes are cut. This is a story written in the present tense, a story that demands you keep up or get left behind in the dust of Galilee. The engine that drives this narrative is a single Greek word, euthes. In our English Bibles, it is translated as immediately, at once, or straightway. While the other gospel writers use it sparingly, Mark is obsessed with it. He uses it over 40 times. It creates a rhythmic, almost staccato heartbeat for the book. Jesus is baptized, and immediately he is in the wilderness. He comes out of the wilderness, and immediately he is calling disciples. They drop their nets, and immediately they are in a synagogue. He heals a man, and immediately he is crossing a lake. There is no downtime. There are no transition scenes where the characters sit around a campfire contemplating the sunset. In Mark's eyes, the world is on fire. The kingdom of God is crashing into human history, and there isn't a second to waste. This urgency resonates deeply with the American psyche, a culture that values efficiency, results, and the now. We live in a world of instant gratification and high-speed delivery. Mark gives us a savior who moves with that same unrelenting momentum. But why the rush? To understand the fast and furious nature of this gospel, we have to look at the audience Mark was writing for, the Romans. Imagine the Roman Empire at its peak, a sprawling, iron-fisted superpower that valued strength, military precision, and administrative efficiency. The Romans weren't interested in long-winded Jewish traditions or abstract poetry. They were a people of action. They built roads that sliced through mountains. They conquered nations with disciplined legions. They worshipped power. Mark knew that to reach the Roman heart, he had to present a Jesus who was a man of action. He presents a Christ who doesn't just talk about the power of God, but demonstrates it with every step. In Mark, Jesus is a spiritual warrior, a cosmic exorcist who walks into a room and commands demons to flee, and they obey immediately. He speaks to the storm, and the waves go flat. This is power theology for a power-hungry empire. It is a cinematic portrayal of a king who doesn't need a throne because he has the authority of the Creator in his very DNA. The historical context of the mid-1st century adds another layer of intensity to this writing style. This wasn't a time of peace and prosperity. It was a time of terrifying upheaval. When Mark was likely writing, the Roman Empire was a tinderbox. Nero was on the throne. The fire of Rome had cast a dark shadow over the Christian community, and the Jewish revolt was beginning to simmer in Judea. To be a follower of Jesus in this era was to live with a target on your back. There was a very real sense that the end of the world, or at least the end of your world, could come tomorrow. This is why Mark writes with such brevity. He isn't writing for people sitting in comfortable pews with air conditioning. He's writing for people who might have to run for their lives before the sun sets. The fast and furious pace isn't just a stylistic choice. It's a survival tactic. It reflects the breathless anxiety of a persecuted church and the desperate hope that the king who moved so quickly in Galilee would return just as fast to save them. For us, listening to this story today, the pace of Mark serves as a spiritual jolt. We are often guilty of domesticating Jesus, turning him into a stained glass figure who offers mild advice and gentle comfort. Mark won't allow that. His Jesus is disruptive. He is a whirlwind. He enters a town, turns the social order upside down, heals the untouchables, challenges the religious elites, and is gone before the authorities can even file a report. This action-first approach forces us to confront the reality of the gospel. It's not a set of ideas to be studied, it's an event to be experienced. When you read Mark, you don't feel like a student in a classroom. You feel like a bystander on a crowded street, trying to catch a glimpse of someone who is changing the world in real time. The narrative structure itself mirrors the all-in commitment that Jesus demands. There is no time for maybe or later. In the Gospel of Mark, the call is always, "Follow me," and the expected response is always, you guessed it, immediately. Furthermore, the lack of fluff in Mark's writing highlights the sheer grit of the journey. Because Mark skips the lengthy sermons found in Matthew or the parables found in Luke, the focus remains squarely on the movement toward the cross. Every chapter is a mile closer to Jerusalem. Every miracle is a provocation that speeds up the inevitable collision with the Roman and Jewish authorities. It's like watching a train head toward a broken bridge. You can't look away because the momentum is too great. This creates a unique form of tension that keeps the listener engaged. For an American audience used to high-stakes drama, Mark delivers. He shows us a Jesus who is constantly under pressure, pressed by the crowds, misunderstood by his family, and hounded by his enemies, yet he never slows down. His mission is a straight line from the Jordan River to the Hill of the Skull. In this section of our story, we are buckling up for a ride through the first half of the book. We see the Galilean spring, a period of explosive growth and undeniable power. But pay attention to the shadows between the lines. Even as the crowds cheer and the sick are healed, the pace remains frantic because Jesus knows what the crowds do not. The clock is ticking, the Roman eagle is watching, the shadows of the temple are lengthening, and the fast and furious gospel is racing toward a climax that will leave the world breathless. As we listen to these accounts of action and urgency, let the speed of the narrative strip away your preconceptions. Don't try to overanalyze the why just yet. Instead, feel the what. Feel the rush of the wind on the lake, the crush of the crowd in the street, and the terrifying, beautiful authority of a man who doesn't just tell us the way, but is the way, moving at the speed of grace. This is the gospel of action. This is the King in motion, and he is moving faster than you think. In the grand theater of the American imagination, power is meant to be broadcast. We are a nation built on the big reveal, the press conference, and the viral success story. From the gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan to the tech campuses of Silicon Valley, our cultural DNA is wired to believe that if you have a solution to a problem, especially a miraculous one, you scale it, you brand it, and you shout it from the digital rooftops. So, when we step into the third chapter of Mark's narrative, we encounter a tension that feels fundamentally un-American. We find ourselves standing in the middle of a swirling storm of supernatural activity, where the laws of physics are being rewritten in real time, yet the architect of these wonders is constantly reaching for the mute button. This is the stage of the story we call the miracle and the muzzle, and it represents one of the most profound psychological and spiritual puzzles in the entire New Testament. In Mark's Gospel, miracles are not mere spectacles. They are visceral, gritty, and startlingly physical. Unlike the more polished theological accounts found in later writings, Mark's miracles have dirt under their fingernails. When Jesus heals, he doesn't just wave a magic wand from a distance. He spits on the ground. He rubs mud into eyes. He puts his fingers into deaf ears. He sighs deeply from his gut. There is a rawness to his power that would have captivated a Roman audience used to the cold, detached statues of their gods. But every time the power flows, every time the blind see, the lame walk, or the dead breathe again, Jesus follows the wonder with a muzzle. He imposes a strict, almost aggressive code of silence that scholars have wrestled with for centuries. This messianic secret isn't a minor plot point. It is the very soul of Mark's message. Consider the first major encounter in this sequence, the cleansing of the leper in Mark chapter 1. In the ancient world, leprosy wasn't just a medical condition, it was a social death sentence. To be a leper was to be a living ghost, a person legally required to cry out unclean, to warn others of their presence. When this man approaches Jesus, he isn't just asking for skin care, he is asking for his humanity back. And Jesus does the unthinkable. He reaches out and touches him. In that moment, the fast and furious pace of Mark slows down to a frame-by-frame intimacy. The power surges, the disease vanishes, and the man is restored. But before the man can even process the shock of his own smooth skin, Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away with a command that sounds like a line from a spy novel. See that you say nothing to anyone. Why the muzzle? Why would the Savior of the world want to suppress the best marketing material he ever had? To the American listener, this feels like a missed opportunity for impact. But Jesus knew that a miracle without a context is a dangerous thing. He knew that the crowds were hungry for a quick-fix king, someone who would heal their bodies and feed their bellies, but leave their souls unchanged. If the news of the leper spread too quickly, Jesus would be reduced to a traveling magician, a divine vending machine. The muzzle was a protective barrier. It was Jesus saying, "I am not here to be your celebrity. I am here to be your sacrifice." He was refusing to let the miracle define him before the cross could. This pattern repeats with a rhythmic intensity that becomes almost frustrating for the reader. We see it again in the house of Jairus, a synagogue leader whose daughter has just died. The room is filled with the loud, professional wailing of mourners, a sound the Romans knew well. Jesus walks in, dismisses the noise as sleeping, and takes the young girl by the hand. He whispers two simple words in Aramaic, Talitha kum, which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately there's that Markan word again. She stands up and walks. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph over the grave. But what does Jesus do next? He strictly charged them that no one should know this. He muzzles the miracle. He wants the girl to have a meal, not a media circus. He wants the family to experience the grace, not the fame. As we dig deeper into these muzzled miracles, we start to see a darker, more confrontational side of the secret. In the world of Mark, the human characters are often the last ones to understand who Jesus is. The disciples are confused, the religious leaders are hostile, and the family of Jesus thinks he's lost his mind. But there is one group that knows exactly who they are dealing with, the demons. Mark records multiple instances where unclean spirits fall down before him and scream, "You are the Son of God." And every single time, Jesus strictly ordered them not to make him known. This is the ultimate muzzle. Jesus refuses to accept testimony from the dark side. He won't allow his identity to be revealed by voices of fear and destruction. He is curating the revelation of his kingship with surgical precision. For the American audience, this is a lesson in the source of our influence. We live in a culture where any PR is good PR, where it doesn't matter who is talking about you as long as your name is trending. But Jesus rejects the validation of the spirits. He is waiting for a different kind of confession, not one shrieked in terror by a demon, but one whispered in faith by a human being at the foot of a cross. Perhaps the most enigmatic miracle in this entire section is the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida in Mark chapter 8. This is the only two-stage miracle in the Bible, and it serves as a perfect metaphor for the muzzle itself. Jesus takes the man by the hand, leads him out of the village, away from the crowd, and spits on his eyes. He asks, "Do you see anything?" The man looks up and says, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." It's a partial healing, a blurry vision. So Jesus touches him a second time, and finally, his sight is restored to 20/20 clarity. To many, this looks like a glitch in Jesus' power. But in the hands of Mark, it's a brilliant narrative device. It mirrors the spiritual blindness of everyone in the story. The disciples see Jesus, but they see him like walking trees. They see the miracle worker, but they don't yet see the suffering servant. They see the power, but they don't see the purpose. The muzzle is Jesus' way of saying, your vision is still blurry. He keeps the secret because the world isn't ready for the full picture. If he were to take off the muzzle too early, the world would see a king of glory, but they would miss the king of grace. They would follow him to a throne, but they would flee from him at the tomb. For us, the muzzle is a profound challenge to our obsession with instant transparency. We want everything on the record, but Mark shows us a God who works off the record. He shows us that the most significant movements of God often happen in the quiet, in the private two-stage healings of our own lives, far away from the applause of the digital village. The muzzle is an invitation to intimacy. When Jesus tells the healed man to go home and not even enter the village, he is prioritizing the personal relationship over the public reputation. As you listen to the accounts of these miracles, I want you to feel the weight of what is being unsaid. Listen for the silence that follows the shout of Ephatha, be opened. In the Gospel of Mark, the miracles are like trailers for a movie that hasn't been released yet. They give us a glimpse of the power, the color, and the stakes, but the director, the Clandestine King, is holding back the full plot until the final act. He is muzzling the noise so that we can focus on the signal. In the American context, we often treat God like a brand we need to promote or a problem solver we need to recruit. But Mark's Jesus refuses to be recruited. He won't be your brand ambassador. He won't be the face of your movement. He will be the Lord of your life, or he will be nothing at all. The muzzle ensures that we can't use him for our own ends. It forces us to ask the same question the disciples had to ask. If he's not here to be famous, what is he here for? The answer to that question is the bridge between the Galilean spring of miracles and the Jerusalem winter of the cross. As the muzzle remains firmly in place through the middle of the book, the tension becomes unbearable. The secret is bursting at the seams. The blind see, the deaf hear, and the dead rise, but the king remains in the shadows. Why? Because the greatest miracle in the Gospel of Mark isn't a blind man seeing, it's a centurion seeing. It's not the opening of an eye, it's the opening of a heart. And that miracle can only happen when the muzzle is finally removed, not in a moment of power, but in a moment of total, silent, agonizing weakness. So, buckle up as we move through these miracle stories. Don't just look at the healing, look at the hush. Don't just marvel at the power, ponder the prohibition. We are witnessing a revolution that refuses to be televised. We are following a king who would rather be misunderstood in silence than worshipped for the wrong reasons. This is the mystery of the Clandestine King, and it is the only path that leads to the truth. In a world that won't stop talking, the muzzle is the most revolutionary act of all. It invites us to stop being spectators of the spectacular and start being followers of the secret. Let the miracles draw you in, but let the muzzle keep you humble. The story is about to take a turn, and the secret is about to become the most public event in history. In the landscape of American storytelling, we have a profound, almost obsessive love for the A-Team. We grew up on tales of elite squads, polished superheroes, and highly competent operatives who execute plans with surgical precision. From the Mission Impossible crews to the Avengers, our cultural mythology suggests that if you are chosen by the king or the leader, it's because you are the best of the best. You are the special forces of the movement. But when we open the Gospel of Mark and look at the inner circle of Jesus, we don't find a group of spiritual Navy SEALs. Instead, we find what can only be described as a beautiful, frustrating, and incredibly relatable mess. This is chapter 4 of our journey, the flawed inner circle, and for an American audience, this is perhaps where the gospel feels most human, most grit, teeth real, and most surprisingly hopeful. In the hands of a different writer, the 12 disciples might have been airbrushed into stained glass icons. We might have seen them as stoic, wise, and always in sync with their master's vision. But Mark, writing with that raw, noir sensibility we discussed earlier, refuses to give us the PR version of the disciples. He gives us the B team. He shows us 12 men who are frequently confused, consistently terrified, and occasionally so self-absorbed that it borders on the comical. And yet, this is precisely why they resonate so deeply with us. In a society like ours, where the pressure to perform and the imposter syndrome are at an all-time high, seeing the foundational pillars of the faith stumble through their internship is a breath of fresh air. It tells us that the clandestine king doesn't recruit based on a resume. He recruits based on a relationship. Consider the sheer cluelessness that Mark records. There is a recurring theme throughout the book that theologians call the blindness of the disciples. It's as if they are watching a 4K movie but forgot to put on their glasses. They witness Jesus feeding 5,000 people with a few loaves and fish, a miracle of staggering proportions, and then, just a few pages later in the boat, they are worrying that they forgot to bring lunch. Jesus literally has to pull them aside and ask, "Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened?" To the American listener, this is the ultimate facepalm moment. We want to yell at the screen, "He just fed thousands." The bread isn't the problem, but if we are honest, we see ourselves in that boat. We see our own tendency to forget yesterday's grace the moment today's crisis hits. We see our own spiritual amnesia that makes us fret over the bread of our bank accounts or our reputations, even after seeing God provide time and time again. Then there is the figure of Peter, the unofficial captain of this flawed squad. In the American context, we love a maverick, a guy who speaks his mind and takes risks. Peter is that guy, but in Mark's gospel, his maverick energy almost always leads to a spectacular crash. The most jarring example is the scene at Caesarea Philippi. This is the big reveal where Peter finally says the right thing, "You are the Christ." It's a moment of triumph. But immediately within the same conversation, when Jesus explains that the Christ must suffer and die, Peter pulls Jesus aside to rebuke him. Imagine that, a fisherman from Galilee trying to correct the creator of the universe on his business plan. It's like an entry-level intern telling the CEO how to run a multi-billion-dollar merger. Jesus' response is the ultimate cold shower. "Get behind me, Satan." Why does Mark include this? Because it highlights the central tension of the clandestine king lens. Peter wanted a king of glory, a king who would kick out the Romans, lower the taxes, and put the disciples on thrones. He wanted the American dream version of the Messiah: power, success, and a win without a loss. But Jesus was presenting a king of the cross. This disconnect between what the followers want and what the leader is provides the dramatic engine for much of the book. It's a mirror for our own lives. We often follow Jesus because we want him to fix our circumstances or bless our plans. We want the crown without the thorns. When the secret of the king turns out to be a secret of suffering, we, like Peter, are tempted to pull him aside and say, "That's not the plan I signed up for." The cluelessness reaches its peak in the way the disciples handle their own ambition. In Mark chapter 9, while Jesus is trying to prepare them for his upcoming execution, the disciples are walking behind him, whispering and arguing. When Jesus asks what they were talking about, they go silent. Why? Because they were arguing about which of them was the greatest. In our hyper-competitive American culture, we understand the GOAT, greatest of all time, debate. We are obsessed with rankings, power players, and who gets the corner office. But to see the disciples doing this while the king is walking toward a death sentence is heartbreaking. It shows that even those closest to the secret are still operating on the world's volume control. They are still listening to the noise of their own egos, while the king is whispering the music of humility. As the story moves toward its dark climax, the floors of the inner circle move from cluelessness to collapse. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the king is in agony, sweating drops of blood and asking his 3 best friends to just stay awake and watch with him. And they fail, not once, not twice, but 3 times. They fall asleep while the fate of the world hangs in the balance. It is a moment of profound vulnerability, not just for Jesus, but for the narrative itself. Mark doesn't hide their exhaustion or their weakness. He shows the superstars of the church at their absolute worst. And then, when the soldiers arrive, the description is devastatingly brief. And they all left him and fled. To a Roman audience, this would have been a story of dishonor. To a modern American audience, it's a story of humanness. We live in a world of cancel culture, where one mistake or one moment of cowardice can define you forever. But the Gospel of Mark uses the flaws of the disciples to set the stage for something bigger: grace. The fact that this book was likely written based on Peter's own accounts tells us everything we need to know. Peter wanted the world to know how badly he messed up, so that the world would know how great the king's forgiveness is. The secret of the king isn't just about his identity, it's about his capacity to use cracked pots to carry his light. The flawed inner circle serves as the perfect foil for the clandestine king. If the disciples were perfect, we might think that Jesus' power was something they helped build a collaborative success story. But because they are so consistently weak, we are forced to realize that the power belongs to the king alone. Their failure is the black velvet that makes the diamond of his faithfulness shine brighter. As we listen to these chapters, don't look down on the disciples. Instead, look for yourself among them. Are you the one sleeping when you should be praying? Are you the one arguing about status when you should be serving? Are you the one trying to correct God's plan for your life? If so, take heart. The Gospel of Mark is a story for the B team. It's a story for those of us who feel like we are constantly walking trees in our spiritual vision. The king doesn't demand that you have it all figured out before you follow him. He doesn't wait for you to be inner circle material before he invites you into the secret. He just asks for your presence, your honesty, and your willingness to keep getting back in the boat, even after you've let him down. In the final act of the book, it is the failure of the disciples that makes the reveal so powerful. When everyone else has fled and the experts have abandoned the scene, the clandestine king stands alone. The secret is finally out, but it's a secret that only the broken can truly understand. The flawed inner circle reminds us that the secret revolution isn't about being good, it's about being his. As you listen to the upcoming accounts of their trials and their eventual restoration, remember that their flaws were not an obstacle to the king's plan. They were the very canvas on which he painted his greatest miracle of all, the miracle of a second chance. This is the gospel for the rest of us. This is the king who loves the flawed. Let the story of the B team give you the courage to stay in the race. The king is still moving, and he hasn't given up on you yet. In the architecture of any great American thriller, there is always a midpoint, a singular, high-stakes scene where the protagonist finally stops running, pulls his closest allies into a dimly lit room, and reveals the true, terrifying nature of the mission. Up until this moment in the Gospel of Mark, we have been swept up in a whirlwind of motion, a fast and furious blur of exorcisms, bread multiplying, and sea calming. The crowds have been screaming, the muzzle has been firmly in place, and the clandestine king has been operating from the shadows of Galilee. But as we reach the 8th chapter, the narrative stops dead in its tracks. The scenery shifts from the dusty fishing villages of the south to the jagged, pagan foothills of Caesarea Philippi. This is the shift, the pivot point where the secret begins to bleed into the light and where the clandestine king lens reveals its most shocking paradox. For an American audience, this section of the story is the ultimate confrontation between our cultural definition of winning and the king's definition of sacrifice. Imagine the setting. Caesarea Philippi was not a Jewish stronghold. It was a city dedicated to Caesar, built on a massive rock face, riddled with shrines to the Greek god Pan, a place the ancients called the Gates of Hades. It is here, against the backdrop of Roman imperial power and pagan mythology, that Jesus poses the question that defines human history. Who do people say that I am? It's a survey of public opinion, a check on the viral status of his brand. The disciples rattle off the popular theories: John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets. To the world, Jesus is a ghost from the past, a reincarnated hero come to fix the present. But then Jesus narrows the focus, looking them in the eye in a moment of cinematic intensity. But who do you say I am? Peter, the impulsive, heart-on-his-sleeve leader of the B team, steps forward and delivers the line the reader has been waiting for. You are the Christ. In this moment, the secret seems to be over. The mystery is solved. The clandestine king has been identified. To Peter and the rest of the disciples, this confession was the beginning of the victory lap. In their minds, the Christ was the ultimate success story, a military liberator who would march into Jerusalem, topple the Roman eagles from the temple walls, and usher in an era of Jewish supremacy. They were ready for the coronation. They were ready for the American dream version of the kingdom. But then, the shift happens. Mark records that Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. This was not part of the script. This was the noir twist that no one saw coming. The king wasn't revealing a throne, he was revealing a tomb. He wasn't announcing a coup, he was announcing a massacre his own. The reaction from Peter is visceral and profoundly relatable to anyone raised in a culture that worships upward mobility. Mark tells us that Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. Imagine the sheer audacity. Peter, having just acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, now tries to manage the Messiah's career. He's essentially saying, Jesus, your messaging is off. You're killing the momentum. We don't talk about suffering and death. We talk about victory and expansion. You're the Christ. You're the winner. Don't let this suffering servant talk ruin the brand. Peter is acting as a first-century spin doctor, trying to protect the king from the secret that the king himself is trying to reveal. But Jesus' response is a verbal thunderbolt that shatters the atmosphere. Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. This is the core of the clandestine king paradox. To the human mind, and especially to the American mind, power is the ability to avoid suffering. We spend billions of dollars and countless hours trying to insulate ourselves from pain, loss, and weakness. We want a God who is a life coach, someone who helps us maximize our potential and minimize our problems. But Jesus identifies this success at all costs mindset as diabolical. He reveals that the secret of his kingship is not found in the avoidance of the cross, but in the embrace of it. The shift at Caesarea Philippi is the moment where we realize that the clandestine king is not hiding his power because he's shy. He's hiding it because his true power is only visible in his total, agonizing surrender. As the scene concludes, Jesus calls the crowd to him the first time he has addressed the public with such stark, uncompromising clarity, and lays down the cost of discipleship. He says, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." To a modern listener, the cross is a piece of jewelry or a symbol on a church roof. But to the audience in Mark, the cross was a state-sponsored instrument of torture and public shaming. It was the electric chair of the Roman Empire. Jesus is telling his followers that if they want to be part of the secret revolution, they have to be willing to lose everything. He is calling for a countercultural movement that finds life through death and finds gain through loss. He is telling the American soul that the path to the secret is not through self-actualization, but through self-denial. This section of the gospel is the great filter. It's where the fans are separated from the followers. Up until now, following Jesus was a thrill. It was about the miracles, the free bread, and the excitement of the new thing. But at Caesarea Philippi, the king turns the muzzle toward his own disciples and tells them the truth they didn't want to hear. The clandestine king is a suicide king. He is on a mission to die for the very people who will abandon him. For us, this shift is an invitation to examine our own motives. Why do we follow? Are we looking for the Jesus who fixes our lives, or are we willing to follow the Jesus who asks us to lay our lives down? The shift changes the pace of the book. The fast and furious momentum is now directed toward a single, inevitable point on the map: Jerusalem. The shadow of the cross now falls over every page. The secret is out, but it is a secret so radical, so unhuman, that the disciples will spend the rest of the book trying to pretend they didn't hear it. As you listen to the upcoming chapters, feel the shift in the air. The Galilee springtime is over. The clandestine king has set his face like flint toward the hill of the skull. The question remains for us, just as it did for Peter. Who do you say he is? Is he the king of your dreams or the king of the cross? The story is no longer just about what he can do for you. It is about where he is going and whether you have the courage to follow him into the dark. This is the moment of truth. The secret has been told. The walk to the cross has begun. Follow the king, but remember, he's going to a place where winners don't go. He's going to the heart of the mystery, and the only way in is to give it all up. We have reached the epicenter of the Gospel of Mark, the moment where the fast and furious momentum of the narrative hits a wall of cold, hard timber. In the American consciousness, the climax of a story is usually marked by a rallying cry, a moment where the hero gathers his strength, overcomes the odds, and stands triumphant over his defeated enemies. We love the Rocky moment, the Independence Day speech, the scene where the underdog finally lands the knockout punch. But the climax of Mark's Gospel is a staggering cinematic reversal of everything we think we know about power, victory, and the American dream. This is chapter 6, The Suffering Servant, and here, the clandestine king finally steps out of the shadows, not to claim a throne of gold, but to transform a Roman execution stake into the ultimate symbol of a paradoxical victory. The transition into this final act is marked by a chilling shift in atmosphere. The bright, sun-drenched shores of Galilee are a distant memory. The air in Jerusalem is thick with political tension, religious hostility, and the looming shadow of the Passover. As Jesus enters the city, the muzzle is still partially in place, but the secret is pulsing with an unbearable energy. He enters not on a war horse, but on a borrowed donkey, a visual noir twist that mocks the imperial pomposity of Rome. To the crowd shouting Hosanna, he is still the success story king they've been waiting for. But Jesus knows that the path to the kingdom doesn't go through the palace. It goes through the torture chamber. This is the moment where the clandestine king lens becomes most uncomfortable for us, because it forces us to watch a king who is not being hunted by his enemies, but is intentionally walking into their trap. The raw human intensity of Mark's writing reaches its peak in the Garden of Gethsemane. If you were looking for a stoic, Superman version of Jesus who faces death with a cool, detached smile, you won't find him in Mark. Instead, we see a man who is deeply distressed and troubled. He falls to the ground, not in a posture of royal dignity, but in a posture of total, agonizing vulnerability. He prays for the cup to pass from him. This is the clandestine king at his most human, and for an American audience that values grit and authenticity, this scene is devastating. We see the weight of the secret finally crushing him. The secret wasn't just his identity, it was his mission to carry the brokenness of the world in his own body. While the B-team sleeps in the shadows, failing him for the final time, Jesus stands alone in the darkness, accepting a fate that looks like the ultimate defeat. As the trials begin, the silence of Jesus becomes the most powerful sound in the narrative. Before the high priest, before the Roman governor Pilate, and before the mocking soldiers, The man who once commanded the wind and the waves now refuses to defend himself. To the Roman mind and to our modern legalistic mind, silence is an admission of weakness. We are a people of testifying, of speaking our truth, of winning the argument. But the silence of the clandestine king is a tactical maneuver of the soul. He is not a victim of a broken system. He is the judge who has allowed himself to be judged. His silence is the final muzzle. But this time, he isn't muzzling the miracles, he is muzzling the self, so that the servant can finish the work. Every blow of the whip and every thorn in the crown is a testament to a power that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Then we come to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Mark's description of the crucifixion is famously sparse and brutal, and they crucified him. No flowery adjectives, no sentimental fluff. He describes the scene with the cold, clinical eye of a war correspondent. The soldiers gamble for his clothes. The religious leaders hurl insults. Even the men dying beside him join in the mockery. It is a scene of total, unmitigated failure by every human standard. The king is stripped, beaten, and nailed to a tree. The sign above his head, the King of the Jews, was meant as a Roman joke, a final piece of imperial sarcasm. But in the noir logic of Mark, that sign is the most honest thing in the book. This is what kingship looks like in a broken world. The throne is a cross, the crown is made of briars, and the victory is a slow, suffocating death. The climax of the climax occurs at the 9th hour, when a supernatural darkness falls over the entire land. It is as if the universe itself is holding its breath. And out of that darkness, Jesus cries out in Aramaic, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me?" This is the noir moment of absolute despair. For the American listener, this is the hardest part of the story to swallow. We want the hero to have a moment of clarity, a sense of peace, a heavenly glow. But Mark gives us a king who experiences the total God-forsakenness of the human condition. He enters the furthest reaches of the secret of death and separation, so that no one would ever have to go there alone. This isn't a defeat that leads to victory. This is the victory. This is the moment where the power of sin and death is exhausted on the person of the king. And then the reveal happens. It's not a thunderbolt from heaven or a legion of angels. It's something much more subtle and revolutionary. Mark tells us that the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. The barrier between the divine and the human is shredded by the death of the king. But the most important reveal happens on the ground, at the foot of the cross. A Roman centurion, a man who represented the very power that killed Jesus, a man who had seen hundreds of men die this way, looks at how Jesus breathed his last and says, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." This is the hinge of the entire gospel. Throughout the book, no human being has been able to say who Jesus is without being told to keep it quiet. The muzzle was always on because the people only wanted a winning king. But now, as the king hangs dead and defeated, the muzzle is finally, permanently removed. Why? Because now there is no danger of a false following. You can't follow a dead man for the perks. You can't follow a crucified king for the celebrity. When the centurion confesses that Jesus is the Son of God at the moment of his death, he is the first person in history to get the secret right. He sees the glory in the gory. He sees the power in the poverty. He realizes that the clandestine king is most godlike when he is most broken. For the American audience, this is the ultimate mind-bending truth. We are taught that victory is about staying on top. Mark shows us that the ultimate victory is about going to the bottom. We are taught that the Son of God should be the most powerful person in the room. Mark shows us that the Son of God is the most sacrificial person on the hill. The suffering servant is not a tragedy. It is a triumph of love that the world's volume control could never understand. The secret is finally out, but it's a secret that can only be seen through the eyes of the centurion, eyes that are willing to look at the failure and see the God within it. As we conclude this chapter, I want you to sit with the silence of the cross. Don't rush to the resurrection just yet. Mark doesn't. He wants you to feel the weight of the dead king. He wants you to realize that the clandestine king chose this ending. He wasn't outmaneuvered by Rome. He was out loving Rome. He wasn't a victim of history. He was the author of history, writing a chapter that no one else could write. In our American culture of self-preservation, the cross of Mark is a radical countercultural call. It tells us that our winning is often losing, and that the only way to truly find our life is to lose it for the sake of the secret. The suffering servant is the peak of the mountain. From here, everything looks different. The miracles of Galilee were just trailers for this event. The muzzle was just a countdown to this confession. The B team's failure was just the background for this faithfulness. The clandestine king is no longer a secret, but he is still a paradox. He is the vandal of our expectations, the disruptor of our dreams of glory, and the savior of our souls. He is the king who died so that we could truly live. Let the centurion's words ring in your ears as the darkness fades. Truly, this man was the Son of God. The secret is out. The revolution has been won. And it didn't look anything like we expected. It looked like a man on a cross, breathing his last and changing the world forever with a whisper of, "It is finished." This is the heart of Mark. This is the victory of the servant. We have arrived at the final threshold of the Gospel of Mark, and it is here that we encounter the most jarring, controversial, and brilliant noir ending in the history of literature. In the American cinematic tradition, we are conditioned to expect a resolution. We want the soaring orchestral score as the hero walks into the sunset. We want the loose ends tied into a neat bow. And we want a post-credit scene that tells us exactly what to think. But the clandestine king has one last surprise for us. This is Chapter 7, Legacy, the Silent Revolution. And it centers on an ending that is so abrupt and so haunting that for centuries, scribes tried to fix it by adding extra verses. But in its original form, Mark ends not with a shout of triumph, but with a whisper of fear and an open-ended question that echoes through the canyons of the modern American soul. To understand the legacy of Mark, we have to look at the scene of the empty tomb through the lens of a silent revolution. Imagine the three women, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, walking toward the sepulchre in the pre-dawn gray. They are carrying spices, the symbols of a finished story, a permanent death. They are worried about the stone, a physical barrier that represents the finality of their grief. But when they arrive, the stone is already rolled back. Inside, they don't find a corpse. They find a young man dressed in a white robe. This is the final messenger of the clandestine king, and his message is a call to action. He is risen. He is not here. He is going before you to Galilee. In any other book, this would be the moment for a grand reunion. But Mark 16:8, the original closing verse, says this: "And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." Think about that for a second. The Gospel of Action, the book that has been obsessed with the word immediately, ends with a total standstill. The book that has been racing toward the reveal ends with a muzzle of fear. To the American listener, this feels like a series-cancelled cliffhanger. It's frustrating. It's indie film ambiguous. But this is the genius of the silent revolution. By ending with the silence of the women, Mark is handing the microphone to you. He is saying that the secret is no longer something Jesus is keeping. It is something the reader must decide to break. The legacy of the clandestine king is not a historical monument we visit. It is a living revolution that we must choose to join. The silence at the tomb is a vacuum that can only be filled by the voice of the believer. For the modern American living in a culture of main character energy, the legacy of Mark is a radical invitation to subversive service. We live in a society that is loud, self-important, and obsessed with the big win. We are told that our value is tied to our visibility, that if we aren't trending, we aren't relevant. But the silent revolution of the Gospel of Mark tells us a different story. It tells us that the most powerful force in the universe didn't come in a thunderbolt of political change, but in the quiet, sacrificial death of a servant king. The legacy is a countercultural way of being human. It's the idea that you can change the world not by being the loudest person in the room, but by being the one who washes the feet of the people who will betray you. It's the secret of finding greatness in the shadows of service rather than the glare of the spotlight. This is the silent revolution in practice. It's the teacher who stays late for the one struggling student without posting it on social media. It's the corporate executive who chooses integrity over a viral profit margin. It's the neighbor who listens instead of preaching. In the American context, where we are constantly pressured to build our brand, the Clandestine King invites us to lose our brand so that we can find our soul. The legacy of Mark is the realization that the kingdom of God moves at the speed of grace, not the speed of the internet. It moves through immediate acts of mercy and muzzled acts of humility. It is a revolution that doesn't need a PR department because its power is self-evident in the lives of those who follow the path of the cross. The abrupt ending of Mark also serves as a profound psychological lesson for the modern seeker. It acknowledges the reality of fear and trembling. Mark doesn't pretend that the resurrection makes everything easy or happy-clappy. He knows that encountering the living God is terrifying. It shatters our categories. It disrupts our success stories. By ending with the women's fear, Mark validates our own doubts and our own hesitations. He shows us that you don't have to be a superhero of faith to be part of the story. The B team failed, the women were afraid, and yet the message remains: He is going before you to Galilee. Why Galilee? Because Galilee is where it all started. It's the place of ordinary life. The legacy of the Clandestine King is that he doesn't just wait for us in the sacred spaces or the big moments. He meets us back in the Galilee of our daily grind, in our jobs, our families, and our quiet struggles. The silent revolution is about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. It's about realizing that the king who dived into the noir of death is now walking ahead of us in the gray of our Monday mornings. As we close this storytelling journey through the Gospel of Mark, I want you to consider the blank space at the end of verse 8. That space is for you. In a world that won't stop talking, the silent revolution asks you to listen. In a culture that demands you be seen, the Clandestine King asks you to serve. The secret is no longer a mystery to be solved. It is a life to be lived. The muzzle has been removed, the shift has occurred, and the suffering servant has been revealed as the Lord of all. The legacy of Mark is a challenge to every American who feels the hollowness of our noisy, celebrity-obsessed age. It offers a raw, gritty, and authentic hope. It tells us that victory isn't about the trophy, it's about the tomb being empty. It tells us that we don't need to be great to be used by God. We just need to be there. The silent revolution is happening all around us, in the quiet corners and the broken hearts. It's a revolution of immediate obedience and clandestine love. So, as you step back into your world, your Galilee, remember the King who chose the shadows. Remember the man who silenced the demons but opened the gates of heaven. The story isn't over. The A team may have failed, but the B team was restored. The women may have been afraid, but eventually they spoke otherwise. We wouldn't have the book. Now, the microphone is in your hand. The King is walking ahead of you. The secret is yours to tell, not with a loud voice, but with a life that reflects the paradox of the cross. This is the Gospel of Mark. This is the silent revolution, and it starts immediately with you.